Just hitting noon here on the East Coast and a Fox News alert, another bombshell report on the Benghazi terror attack. Welcome to this hour of Happening Now. I'm Jenna Lee.
And I'm John Scott. A Senate Intelligence Committee report on that attack on our Libyan consulate has just been released. It disputes what the Obama administration told Americans after the incident. The report finds the U.S. should have anticipated and prepared for an attack, that Benghazi was under-resourced, no U.S. military forces were in position to intervene to help the victims, and the Libyan guards on site that night did nothing. Ambassador Chris Stevens, along with 3 other Americans, were murdered, and the victims' families have been pleading for answers ever since. Joining me now, KT McFarland, Fox News National Security Office analyst, I should say, and former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense in the Reagan administration. The report out just this morning, 85 pages. I don't know if you've had time to read through it all, but are there any surprises to you?
You know, John, it is a bombshell. And why? Because they conclude the attacks on Benghazi were preventable. Now, that means Americans died, and those deaths could have been prevented. That's a bombshell. Now, they say that the reason is the State Department didn't tell the military that they had a consulate there. The intelligence community didn't share what they knew about the al-Qaeda affiliates in the region. It just sounds like nobody was talking to anybody, and yet we all know they should have been talking to each other. So I conclude from this, John, it is no longer a phony scandal. We have now gone past that. We now have demonstrable proof from a bipartisan Senate committee that this is not a phony scandal. This is a real thing. And my conclusion is it is time for a special prosecutor for the United States Congress, or at least the House of Representatives, to appoint a special select committee to get to the bottom of this, because every week there are more unanswered questions about what really happened and why.
There are also conclusions very vividly highlighted in this report that the administration has not been helpful, was not helpful to these Senate investigators. Let me read one of them for you. The committee notes that the IC, that's shorthand for the intelligence community, State and Department of Defense provided the committee with hundreds of key documents throughout this review, although sometimes with a significant amount of resistance, especially from State. This lack of cooperation unnecessarily hampered the committee's review. They are still not coming forward, with the evidence, even to a U.S. Senate committee. Yeah,
I mean, they're stonewalling. There's also demonstrable evidence now that the president knew that it wasn't a spontaneous crowd responding to an obscure YouTube video, but that it was a planned attack by an al-Qaeda affiliate. So, again, there's a lot more information that we're now getting out, and it's time for a special prosecutor. John, I was in the White House during Watergate, and I know how if you're in the administration, you're in the executive branch, you don't want to give over documents that are going to make you look dopey or make it look like you've made mistakes. But in this case, people died. And so the only way America's going to get to the bottom of this, and the American people are going to know, and those families are going to know why their sons died, is if there is a special prosecutor who has the ability to subpoena witnesses, to provide whistleblower protection to them, and get to the bottom of this. Otherwise, the cover-up will continue, and the files will be buried, and nobody will ever really know.
That's one of the, we'll get to that in a minute, that's one of the conclusions of the report, but the glaring finding, they call it finding number one, that in the months before the attacks on September 11th, 2012, the Intelligence Committee provided ample strategic warning that the security situation in eastern Libya was deteriorating and that U.S. facilities and personnel were at risk in Benghazi. So intelligence was providing the information. It's just that nobody apparently at the State Department was listening.
That's the smoking gun, John. The intelligence was provided, so then the question becomes, why did the State Department not act on that intelligence? Why did they look the other way? I mean, look, my apartment building in New York City on September 11th had more added security on September 11th anniversary than a consulate in the most dangerous part of the world. So why? There are a lot of unanswered questions, and it does seem that we continue to have more and more unanswered questions. We now have a smoking gun. We now have demonstrable proof that those attacks should have been prevented. The American people are owed an explanation.
Also, a lack of accountability from the administration. That gets blasted in the report, both in terms of the accountability for what happened and the search for the attackers. The report notes that nobody has been arrested in connection with that attack.
Correct.
We will continue to keep an eye on this and bring any more information out of that report as we see it. KT McFarland, thank you.
Thanks, John.